This episode of Test Drive is brought to you by eAWD.
Last summer, we produced an episode on the history of Volvo's high-performance cars under their R moniker and Polestar. We touched on this vehicle at the end as we looked towards the future for Volvo and performance. Our spotlight is on this 2020 Volvo S60 T8 e-all-wheel drive Polestar Engineered. Using a similar setup to the S90 T8 inscription we featured in 2018, this comes with unique go-fast bits to boost power up to 415 horsepower and 494 pound-feet of torque. We're going over absolutely everything you need to know if you're in the market for a compact luxury plug-in hybrid electric performance vehicle. This Volvo is a pretty unique offering in the luxury segment. Over the past little while, Volvo has really started to push towards electrification. In fact, everything except their cross-country line of vehicles has an electric option. This is electrified, the S90 as we mentioned. I mean, we've done all the other models in Canada that have an electric option, and even the XC40 is coming out with a full electric later this year. You don't get it with the cross-countries, which is fine, and this, or the V60 cross-country, is basically the same thing. It's just raised a little bit. We've talked about that before. We've done it all. But let's go over this Polestar engineered version of the S60. It uses the same 2-liter twin-charged inline-4 engine that we've seen on other vehicles, pretty much every single vehicle we featured from Volvo that's sold here in Canada. But it boosts power for the gas-only version for an extra 12 horsepower and 22 pound-feet of torque more over the T6R design that we featured in the summer. But the electric drive is for the rear wheels only, like we've talked about with other twin-engine Volvo electric cars before. Has an 87 horsepower electric motor with 177 pound-feet of torque. That's how we get that number up to 415 and almost 500 pound-feet of torque when it comes to this little bit more power than the regular T8. But that's why I say this is a unique offering, because it's also a performance car, and that's what's a little strange. This would compete more or less with something like the BMW M340i or the Mercedes AMG C43, because it isn't a full-on performance car. It's sort of halfway there, but it's electrified, and the competition isn't at that point yet. Now, compared to the T6R design that we featured last year, that car would do 0 to 100 kilometers in 5.5 seconds. Not bad. But with this T8 Polestar Engineered, we get that number down to 4.3 seconds. And if you remember a few weeks ago, we featured the 2020 BMW X3M competition. That would do 0 to 100 in 4.1 seconds. So this is almost as fast as a proper M car. Now, it is 232.2 kilograms heavier than the regular T6 car because you've got the batteries and the electric motors. Despite all that, you still have that fantastic 0 to 100 kilometer time, and with the full electric mode, you can go about 35 kilometers. I tested it last night, fully charged, and I almost did it. I'd say I did about 32 full electric kilometers. It is a little colder right now, and we talk about that. When we do the electric stuff, they don't quite get all the range when it's winter time. Now, as far as the exterior and interior dimensions go, everything is the same from the regular gas S60. There's some small interior changes though. You do have a slightly larger transmission tunnel. It's not actually for the transmission, that's where the batteries go. So if you do have to put a third person in the back, they're gonna have a lot less leg room. And also there's less storage in the center console because again, the batteries are there. Volvo switched up the center area. You don't have a little tray for your coins anymore. The cup holders are still there. Also, you lose out on the quad zone climate control. The suspension also gets an overhaul over the regular S60, and that's probably where a lot of people are going to be interested when it comes to this car. The front suspension adds Öhlins adjustable shock absorbers with a patented dual flow valve and performance-tuned coil springs with increased spring rates. You have 22 adjustment settings for the front suspension and the rear suspension. It's a lot easier to get to the front ones because they're right here in the engine bay, and they are manual, so you have to actually reset it, go all the way clockwise until you hit kind of the end, and then you've got 22 notches that you can go up to from firm to soft, 22 being the softest. And Volvo actually recommends not to go to 0, which this car was set up in when I brought it home. They say to go to about 2 and 4 in the back, or 12 and 15 in the back if you want something a little bit more comfortable. And then they also say that all four corners should be the same number, so I'm not sure why they've got two different sets of information there. Everything is in the owner's manual. I actually do have the front suspension set up now to about 14. I haven't gotten to the back yet because the easiest way really is to lift up each back corner to be able to get into those adjustments. There's a rubber cap that sits on top of them for the rear so that they don't get damaged because you're driving around all day. So there is a little bit of protection back there. It's not easy to get into unless you lift up the car. So there's the options for that. I mean, the electronic one would be a lot easier, obviously, but it is kind of fun to be able to do it yourself. The rear suspension uses the same Öhlins adjustable shock absorbers, but it doesn't use coil springs. We've talked about this before when it comes to these Volvo models. It uses a performance-tuned transverse composite leaf spring, again with an increased spring rate. So you have some adjustment there. I was asked how awful the ride was. It's not. It doesn't perform the same way as a BMW. You can feel that. It doesn't really grip the same way that a BMW does, or handle, or perform, especially to the level of an M performance car. But the ride is still pretty good. You have to adjust it though. It will come from the factory, kind of mid-level, and you can change it yourself. So make sure you do that. And if you're like me, you're driving a car that somebody else has driven, just go and make sure, because probably whoever set this to 0 didn't read the owner's manual. The rest of the changes for the Polestar Engineered version are pretty much cosmetic only. There are 4 paint colors: white, black, gray, and silver. This one is gray, costs $900. The front grille is unique to the Polestar with a Polestar badge on the left side, or right side if you're looking at it. That is the only real indication that this is different if you're not a seasoned enthusiast. Same thing goes out back. Back end is pretty much cookie cutter S60, but that badge replaces the T6 and any of the other badges that would be there with a Polestar badge. Now, I've been told that they're changing the design of the badge for the 2021 model years. Right now it is the new Polestar logo, but they apparently are going to be switching it to just say Polestar Engineered. Personally, I like the look of this more. As Volvo grows their Polestar brand, people will become more familiar with it. Considering Volvo has only had about a year or so with this new branding, it obviously hasn't been adopted too well yet, but I like that instead of just a little badge that says Polestar Engineered. So if you're looking for a car like this, maybe stick with the 2020, or just replace the badges if you buy a new one, and they do make those changes. You have the high gloss black grille, the black chrome tailpipes, gold brake calipers, and gold seat belts. As I mentioned, Volvo is trying to adopt gold as their color now. They've gotten rid of the ocean blue that was on previous Polestar models. Gold looks pretty cool. Inside, you can get any color of leather you want as long as it's black. It comes with Napa leather on the interior, only black. Actually, Volvo calls it charcoal. You still get Volvo's fantastic seats, super comfortable, good amount of adjustment, memory for the front 2 passengers. You have heat on the front seats, heat on the outboard rear seats, a heated steering wheel, dual zone climate control. A head-up display is an option, and then everything else is what you would more or less get on an inscription level car. You have the leather dashboard, and everything is more or less soft touch, but you don't quite get as much. They do strip out a little bit, I guess, to save on weight because it is a heavier vehicle. It's more performance oriented. The steering wheel, pretty much the same that we've seen from Volvo. They do have contrast stitching in it, and then you also have the metal mesh aluminum decor panels instead of wood trim. It seems to be the way that we're going with performance and sport-oriented cars. I prefer wood, but what can you do? You cannot change any of those options. This is basically the way it comes. You get it in a different paint color, up to 4, and that's it. And honestly, it makes sense for our market here in Canada. This will be a very special and unique vehicle. I don't think a lot of people are necessarily going to be buying it, and as we talk about it on the road test, you'll understand why. Because it's a hybrid performance car, but it's not really hardcore. So the enthusiasts are still probably going to be buying the M340i or the AMG C43. This is different though. So let's jump in now. We'll talk about how it is on the road and everything that you need to know if you're in the market for an $80,000 plug-in hybrid performance car. Cut the charge time on your 2020 Volvo S60 T8 Polestar Engineered down to 2.5 hours with the eAWD smart home charger. From the mobile app, you can control access to your charger, use other public charging solutions, and you can even see how much it costs to charge your vehicle. For this Volvo, it only costs me about 70 cents to go from 0 to 100% electric range. So 35 kilometers only costs you 70 cents. For more information about the eAWD Smart Home Charger and the entire lineup of eAWD solutions, visit elmec.ca. There is a lot that I need to go over when it comes to the driving of this vehicle. First off, let's talk about the Öhlins suspension. I talked about the outside, that you have to adjust the front and the rear manually, which I guess is kind of cool for some people. I would personally prefer just to have an electronic button to be able to play with it. The front ones are super easy to get to. Pop open the hood, reset it, you're good to go. But you should have noticed on our B-roll, and again right now, that to get to the rear ones is not easy. I had to actually jack the vehicle up so I could get my hands into the rear wheel wells. Taking the caps off is a pain in the ass. You have to basically push the sound deadening material inside the wheel well as far back as possible to be able to pull that off and pry off that stupid cap, and then you can reset it. Now, you also should remember that I told you the front suspension was set to 0, which Volvo doesn't recommend, and the rear suspension on the right side was actually set to about 10, and the left side was actually set to 0 again. So somebody was playing with this, they didn't read the owner's manual, or they gave up halfway and didn't do the job properly. So I have set all 4 corners to 15. That's more or less what Volvo suggests if you want comfort mode on this. Now, I did take this yesterday to Sherbrooke, which is not a far drive, and it's also not a nice drive because the roads both through the county area as well as on the highway are complete trash. Yes, you do feel the bumps a little bit more. The suspension on this is a little firmer, and that's because it's still a performance-oriented car. If you don't want that, just go for the regular T8 S60. You get the plug-in hybrid, you don't get the orange bits or the go fast bits, but you'll probably have a slightly better ride. And then if you configure one of the Volvos with their 4C active air suspension, it just feels really nice and airy on the road. But we want to talk about this specific car. And it goes back to the question of our title. Who's the target demographic for this? I get it, Volvo enthusiasts, people who absolutely love Volvo. They will be the ones who want to buy this car, and that's fine. But will an average enthusiast be interested in this car? Not just to look at it, I'm sure most will, but to actually own it. Would you rather buy this over the BMW M340i? If you really want to have that 35-kilometer electric range, then this is the way to go. But if you want a performance car, it's almost there. I mean, it goes quick. You have to get up to speed. It doesn't feel like it's going as fast as it is, but then all of a sudden you're doing 160 on the highway. It's because there's really no sound. That's the one thing I realized when I was driving back from Sherbrooke. We're in pure mode right now, full electric mode, just to drive around. But if I put this into, it's not sport mode, it's Polestar Engineered mode, it kicks on the engine and gives you essentially full power all the time. It assumes you want to be using it, so it gives you the option to use it. And it goes. I mean, we pick up speed really quick, but there's just no excitement coming out of the back end. There's no drama. And that's what you want from a performance car. If we think back, because we didn't drive the actual M340i, but we drove sort of the next best thing, I guess. It's the X4 M40i. That car actually sounded really good. I mean, it could have sounded better, but it sounded really good for what it was. And I imagine that the M340i would sound the same. Same more or less goes for the Mercedes-AMG C43. You're going to get some drama from the exhaust. But with this, there's just not much. I mean, you do hear the supercharger, you do hear the turbos. It's a cool thing. But that's all coming from the front of the car. Not so much from the back of the car. So let's see, we'll do a light launch here. Oh yeah, see, like instant torque, and you're up to 50 real quick, up to 60 real quick. You can get to 100, 4.3 seconds. I know this car will do it, but you just don't hear it, you don't feel it. It's just a different experience altogether. And I think it's because, at least for me, I'm preconditioned to understand speed is related to sound. The faster you're going, the more sound your engine's making, the more sound the exhaust is making. You just hear it. Not so much with this. You can see we're on this rougher road here. Maybe not so much on the video or the audio, but I can tell that there is a difference now that I've set the rear suspension. That's the thing I was going to mention before actually fixing it. I was going to say, after fixing the front suspension, I started to feel that the back was the problem, and sure enough, it was. But that's the problem with this car. The thing I'm still trying to understand is, again, the target demographic, who's going to buy it, who's going to appreciate it. Yes, if you keep it in Polestar Engineered mode, you don't have to worry too much about the battery, especially if you've got it charged up, because it actually does charge the battery a little bit more than if you're in normal hybrid mode. It's essentially sending the extra power not being used by the gas back into the battery, so you'll keep charge a lot fuller than you normally would. But 35 kilometers, it's pretty short. And I did some testing with it. We did pretty much 35 kilometers fully electric nonstop, even in the winter here. Helps because I actually have the car warmed up before I get going. But if it was double, if you could get 70 kilometers out of it fully electric, then it would start to make a lot more sense. Bump the battery capacity up to 20 kilowatt hours. You get almost twice the range. Now we're in business, because at least for what I do, most of it's more than 35 kilometers away. And I would like to be able to get the most electric out of it when I wanted to, but then still be able to chuck it in, oh man, give it a nice rip. Like, it goes. There's no doubt that this car can boogie. It's just the all-wheel drive. That's one of the other things I noticed too. I actually had to keep the car mostly in constant all-wheel drive mode, which keeps the front engine running almost all the time with the electric ready to go when you're going. Because if you're in electric only mode with this specific set of Pirelli Soto Zero tires, you can feel you're losing traction. And in fact, even if you have traction control on, you keep it in pure mode, EV mode, and you're just using the rear wheels, and there's a little bit of snow on the road, you can make it slide without a whole lot of effort. I was having a little bit of fun with it yesterday, but from a safety perspective, the all-wheel drive system definitely is not as good as BMW's xDrive. You can feel it pretty instantly when there's rougher weather. You want to have it in constant all-wheel drive mode. It makes a big difference. In full electric mode, though, you are going to be slipping and sliding a little bit. It's not ideal, and you can also feel it too. It's one of the major, again, not really a complaint, but one of the major differences when you're driving a car like this is you can feel when the car is shifting essentially into four-wheel drive mode or front-wheel drive mode. You can feel it sort of slip in to get that engine running at the same speed as the tires. It's a weird sensation. It's not a bad one, but it's just different. Well, I know you guys have been very patient. We usually do our launches with the performance cars at the beginning of our driving segment, but saved it for the last. There is no launch control. Another thing Volvo missed the ball on. So if you do it yourself, more or less. Oh, there we go. Oh boy, that was a bad hit. 100. It was probably close. I'll tell you right now that M850i that we drove, that definitely felt quicker, and even the X3M competition. So I mean, you've got the power there. You've got the electricity. It's a mix of both. You've got power when you want it. You have 35 kilometers more or less free if you charge it. You've got the safety that comes with Volvo, which is hard to beat. And then you've got these really snazzy gold belts.
How did the 2020 Volvo S60 T8 all-wheel drive Polestar Engineered do in terms of fuel economy? It completed our 100-kilometer test loop in hybrid mode in 6 liters per 100 kilometers or 39.2 US miles per gallon, which was only a few tenths of a liter worse than the XC60 T8 and S90 T8. The rest of our 814-kilometer week wrapped up at 6.8 liters per 100 kilometers or 34.6 mpg. Again, very close to the other T8 twin-engine Volvo models we've driven so far. Can't argue with the fuel economy on this one as we kick off our list of likes. Volvo's exterior design is also a solid win for us, with the right mix of sportiness carried over from the R design with unique elements to make the Polestar Engineered version stand out. Interior seat comfort is still a strong selling point for Volvo, with good rear seat space for the size segment. The performance was also good. While it's only a slight horsepower and torque boost over the regular T8, this S60 has the right mix of power to get you moving, even if it doesn't sound like you're going very fast. And finally, the equipment offered on the Polestar Engineered trim is what we would expect from a performance-oriented compact luxury car. You lose out on ventilated seats and quad-zone climate control that you get on the Inscription, but you do have the full suite of Volvo's IntelliSafe technology, optional head-up display, heated seats, and triple-level heated steering wheel. Not bad at all. In terms of dislikes though, I have to consider both the type of buyer looking at this from a PHEV perspective and the one that wants a performance sedan. Price is a knock on both fronts, as the BMW M340i and Mercedes-AMG C43 offer about the same performance without the hybrid boost for about $10,000 to $12,000 less. Also, due to the MSRP for this model, the T8 Polestar Engineered doesn't qualify for the Canadian or Quebec rebates on plug-in hybrid vehicles, so you're eating the full price up front. Which brings us to dislike number 2, which is the EV range. At 35 kilometers in 2020, we expect more, especially when the upcoming Polestar 2 boasts similar power numbers, an MSRP starting at $69,000 Canadian and a range of 440 kilometers fully electric. Unless you're using your T8 Polestar Engineered in the city exclusively and can run most of your daily errands fully electric, 35 kilometers just isn't going to cut it. Our last dislike will hopefully be the last time we add this to our list as we look towards the future of Volvo's infotainment. Sensus is still a slow mess, with serious latency problems. 2020 hasn't addressed this like some commenters have been suggesting, with a good 30-second startup delay before the system is even usable. I had plenty of problems with Sensus latency on startup when changing the drive mode from hybrid, as it starts up in, to pure, sometimes having it jump up to constant all-wheel drive because of how slow the input was, or the camera is taking 15 to 20 seconds to come online when trying to back out of a spot. Polestar's website shows an updated Sensus infotainment system that should be based on the Android mobile operating system, along with a new gauge cluster computer. We're hoping we'll see this update across Volvo's range of vehicles for the 2021 model years, so we can finally enjoy their infotainment systems as much as we enjoy the rest of their cars. But let me know in the comments below if the 2020 Volvo S60 T8 Polestar Engineered is a car that you'd spend your hard-earned money on, and if you're already a Volvo enthusiast or not. I'm still betting that most people who will end up buying this car are returning Volvo customers, but I have been wrong once or twice in my life before.